It's January 1997, and a lone figure emerges out of the Antarctic wilderness.
There were people there looking at me and wonder who I was, and I told them that I skied across the whole of Antarctica, and he didn't believe me at first. He thought I was just kidding.
But Børge Ousland was not kidding. The Norwegian had just become the first person to cross the continent of Antarctica, alone and unaided, a grueling almost 3,000-kilometre journey across the loneliest, most inhospitable land on Earth. Soon he was being welcomed into the warmth of the Antarctic Research Centre, McMurdo Station, and after 2 months of almost complete solitude was talking to the world by radio.
It hasn't really come true that I made it yet. I think I just have to let it sink. I worked for this for several years, and now I'm here, and it's fantastic.
All the insecurity is left behind. You don't need to worry about crevasses anymore. You don't need to worry about the cold, the howling winds and bad weather, and if you're going to make it or not. It's just like being born again. You know, everything is new. The first coffee, a good meal, to sit on a chair with knife and fork, to sleep in a bed, and not to forget the first shower, which is also quite important.
Børge Ousland's journey had begun in November 1996.
My idea was to ski all the way from the Weddell Sea, from the edge where the ocean meets the ice, and all the way across Antarctica to Ross Sea via the South Pole. So starting from Berkner Island, going up through the Transantarctic Mountains up to the big plateau on the South Pole, which is about 3,000 meters almost, and to the South Pole. That's 1,350 kilometers just to go to the South Pole, and then you're halfway, and then you're going down through the mountains, down to the big Ross ice shelf, and out to McMurdo Station, where I wanted to finish this trip. And the plan was to do it completely alone, just with what I needed in the sled, bringing that sled with me all the way from A to B.
Børge Ousland had already skied alone and unsupported to the North Pole in 1994, and then the following year to the South Pole. That had left this challenge of skiing alone across the whole of Antarctica.
Antarctica is the highest, largest, coldest and most wind-swept continent on Earth, and it's always been a fascinating place for adventurers and men and women who want to do great deeds out in the wilderness.
It was on those same frozen wastes that 90 years earlier the great Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen had beaten a British team led by Captain Robert Scott to become the first person to reach the South Pole.
The challenge now is more the mental and the physical challenge, and for me it's fascinating to be able to survive 3 months by yourself and cover that distance with just what you need in your sled.
And can you remember what was going through your mind on that day when you set out on that expedition? Was it fear, trepidation, excitement?
Yeah, the start of those big solo trips, I think it's always been the most difficult part on the expedition for me. To see that airplane leave you and you're on day one on a trip, no one has done it before, you're completely alone and you don't know what's going to happen on the way. To see that plane leave is a shock for me. And it actually takes a while to get accustomed to that lonely landscape you have in Antarctica. And I think actually that landscape makes it even harder because there is so few impulses from the outside. It's just this naked white expanse of snow, and it's the same every day, week after week.
In that whole time, the only wild creature that Børge Ousland saw was one bird, about 500 kilometers from the coast. And the hardest part? Well, there were a few, particularly at the beginning.
Yeah, there was difficult times on that expedition for sure. One thing is to get that sled moving. It was a shock how heavy that sled was. I had food for more than 90 days and the sled was 178 kilos, and just to pull it was a nightmare. And that was day one. And I thought, oh my God, am I going to be able to pull this sled all the way across Antarctica?
It did get easier. Each day the sled got a little lighter. Most of the weight was food: porridge to start the day, chocolate, soya oil, dried meat, mashed potato. butter.
It's very much a ritual of the day, and that's something I looked forward to every day. And that's, I think, one of the great things about doing such an expedition, that everything becomes so simple. Just to drink a lukewarm cup of water is luxury.
For the first couple of weeks, Børge Ousland had no contact at all with the outside world. He had a radio but couldn't find the right frequency. At last he did get it to work, but still the solitude could be overwhelming. Mentally, the days were easier. It was the nights that were hard.
Being 100% there mentally during the day when you're skiing, you have to be focused, you have to keep the direction, and you have to take care of equipment and weather. But in the night, you're lying there, you're staring up into that tent wall without anything to do for hours, most part of the day actually. And you need to be able to cope with that change between being very active and not doing anything at all. And the recipe for me was the ability to just turn off a switch and move into another reality, really. And I brought some pictures of my family, I had letters. I also had a small bag of poems, which I copied and cut out the excess paper to save weight. And I pulled a poem every night and read it, and that gave me something to think about.
But then came a new challenge. After weeks alone, Børge Ousland reached the South Pole. He was halfway. It should have been a high point. But instead, the American research station there was dangerously enticing.
Everything I dreamed of was there, food, shower, other people, warmth, safety. It's an easy way out. I mean, I could easily be tempted to go into that base and not leave. The doctor said that I had to come in, and he wanted to check me out before I continued, but I said no. And the people on the base, they invited me in for a cup of coffee, but I said no, I want to keep that loneliness inside me because I need that to be able to move on. So I continued.
But there were more high points than there were low points.
I think the greatest high point was when I finally could say goodbye to the plateau, because the plateau at the South Pole, in one way, it's a terrible place because there is absolutely no protection from the wind, and it's between 2,000 and 3,000 meters high and very, very cold. So you're always fighting against the elements. At the end of the plateau, I came to what's called the Devil's Dance Floor. And first of all, to leave the plateau and get down in between the mountains in protected area where you have actually some warmth from the sun was a great feeling itself. But to be in that historical place, to see all these mountains and ice falls which I read about in the books, and to be there myself, to go that route that Amundsen took, that was actually, I think, one of the really big high points on that expedition.
There were more adventures to come. At one point, Børge Ousland fell down a crevasse and was saved only by his sled. But 64 days after setting out, he at last reached McMurdo Station and the end of his journey. Børge Ousland is still exploring. In 2001, he crossed the Arctic alone, and he's also gone to the North Pole during the winter, a feat that many thought impossible.